I call this meeting of the Hurst-Euless-Bedford Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present. This meeting has been duly called, and that notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with Texas Open Meeting Act, Texas Government Code Chapter 551. Good evening to everybody to another 100-degree board meeting. And we are going to start with an invocation by Board Secretary Julie Cole.
Join me in prayer if you can. Dear Lord, thank you so much for the sweet summertime, for kids having fun in pools and on playgrounds, time to relax and read a little, or just time to take a breath for ourselves. Grant this board your wisdom to make decisions that enable all of our students and honor our teachers and our employees. In your name we pray.
Thank you, Ms. Cole. And now we will have our pledges by Board Member Chris Brown.
If you'll please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And the Texas pledge.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one
and indivisible.
Thank you, Chris. Sorry about that. All right, this is the board meeting where every year the board reads our ethics statement and code of conduct, and we will read this all together. So I will get it started. As a board member of the board, will we read it all together?
Yes.
Got it.
Okay. As a board member of the board, I shall promote the best interest of the district as a whole, and to that end shall adhere to the following ethical standards: equity and attitude. I will be fair, just, and impartial in all of my decisions and actions. I will accord others the respect I wish for myself. I will encourage expressions of different opinions and listen with an open mind to others' ideas. Trustworthiness and stewardship. I will be accountable to the public by representing the district's policies, programs, priorities, and progress accurately. I will be responsive to the community by seeking its involvement in the district affairs and by communicating its priorities and concerns. I will work to ensure prudent and accountable use of district resources. I will make no personal promise or take private action that may compromise my performance or my responsibilities. Honor and conduct. I will tell the truth. I will share my views while working for consensus. I will respect the majority decision as the decision of the board. I will base my decisions on fact rather than supposition, opinion, or public favor. Integrity of character. I will refuse to surrender judgment to any individual or group at the expense of the district as a whole. I will consistently uphold all applicable laws, rules, policies, and governance procedures. I will not disclose the information that is confidential by law or that will needlessly harm the district if disclosed. Commitment to service. I will focus my attention on fulfilling the board's responsibilities of goal setting, policy making, and evaluation. I will diligently prepare for and attend board meetings. I will avoid personal involvement in activities the board has delegated to the superintendent. I will seek continuing education that will enhance my ability to fulfill my duties effectively. Student-centered focus. I will be continuously guided by what is in the best interest of all students of the district. All right, thank you, board. Tonight, the Board of Trustees is meeting in a work session regular board meeting to officially act on the items disclosed on the posted agenda. The board welcomes and appreciates comments and input from the community. Open forum is provided at each meeting to allow the public to address the board. There will be 2 open forums tonight. Open forum number 1 is to hear requests regarding agenda items only. Open forum number 2 is to hear requests or make comments regarding non-agenda items and will be heard at the end of the meeting. Those addressing the board are asked to limit their comments to 3 minutes per meeting. The speaker should identify his or her name, group affiliation if any, and make a brief presentation with an identified solution if one is sought. Remarks should be addressed to the board as a whole. Oral presentations may not include charges against any employee or board member by name. It is my responsibility to determine if the person addressing the board has attempted to resolve a concern informally or through the district's complaint policies. If not, the speaker will be directed to follow the appropriate policy. The board requests that all presentations be made in a courteous, respectful, and professional manner and asks that speakers monitor their own behavior. If you wish to speak during one of the open forums, please fill out one of the cards located on the table in the entry hall. Do we have any? No. All right, Dr. Harrington, any?
The one comment I did want to share, one activity that I was able to take part in last week was the RDAC meeting with the Navy. That's the Recruiting District Advisory Committee. It's a committee that we've remained partnered with the Navy for a number of years, and that has really benefited us with some activities where the Navy has brought things to our district where other districts have not. So that was something I was able to take part in on Saturday.
All right, any clarifications required?
None at this time, but I will have a couple for the upcoming Friday update.
Okay. All right, now we'll review the board activity chart. I'll start down with Mr. Cargile.
There's lots of activities that we did towards the end of the year. The only thing I just want to say publicly, because I just think we do such an awesome job of it, is once again, I just thought the Keys graduation and all the graduations were fabulous this year. The venue that we're using, the fact that we're not limiting the number of parents that can see and graduate their kids, just the cheering. Every year, it's one of our most exciting events, and just kudos to everybody. It went off very well.
Ms. Colt?
Yeah, I have a couple of things I want to talk about that I did towards the end of this school year. The first thing I want to talk about is the Student Ambassador Celebration. And I don't know if Mariana Royer is here. No? Okay. I just thought it was such a great event. The students plan it, write it, do the whole things themselves, and they honor the seniors that are graduating from the student ambassadors, and it's led by the juniors. And it's a fantastic event, very celebratory. Graduations, of course, top-notch. Retirement celebrations were aplenty. Last week, was it last week? Yes, last week at the Chamber of Commerce was the annual State of the District. And Dr. Harrington did his first ever State of the District to the community, and he did a fabulous job. All of us that were there were so proud that he's our superintendent and that he was telling the community about all the great things that we're doing in HEB ISD. Great job, Dr. Harrington. I also attended on Friday afternoon, there was a culmination of a week-long camp called the Mars Rover Camp, and there were about 50 students that participated in this camp that took place at Bell High School but was in conjunction with SMU and NASA. And these kids built a whole Mars terrain, and they built a rover, and I mean, it just blew my mind. And they just all did such a good job explaining what they each individually did, and I was so proud. And there's another one happening this week, and so those of you that have time, I highly recommend you go by there on Friday. This weekend, I also participated in the North Texas Area Association of School Boards Summer Planning Meeting, and we planned our sessions for the upcoming school year, so we've got some really good learning for board members and superintendents coming up in the next school year. And I want to take a moment while I have the mic to challenge this board. all of us attended HEB Reads kickoff, and it was such a great event. I have signed up for HEB Reads and am logging my hours, and my challenge to all of you is that you do the same, that you sign up for HEB Reads and you log your summer reading hours, and some of our staff have sweetened the pot for us. They have told me that anyone on this board that completes the total number of hours for HEB Reads, you can choose between a multi-layer chocolate cake made by Kira Elledge or a dozen specialty cookies made by Carla Dawkins. So that should be worth it. And that's all I have.
Hold on, I'm writing that down. I log my hours, but I better be sure to log them all. I'm writing it down. The only thing I have to report this time is graduations, of course. They were fabulous, but I just really want to give a shout out to Mr. Streeter and Dr. Harrington for really taking care of us, getting the bus to get us all there on time and so easily, like to just be dropped off, and just making sure we were taken care of. It was really awesome, and I appreciate all y'all did to help us, you know, be able to kind of enjoy getting there on time. But of course, Keys is my favorite night of the year. We all know why. That's where my son graduated from. So I loved it, but I really loved Dickey's Arena. I really love Dickey's Arena. They did a great job. Their staff was amazing. It's a beautiful venue. It's a little freaky, the big screen, you know, because you didn't want to look up. You're like, I could see myself. But it was really a great weekend. So thanks to both of you for really pulling that together. It was awesome.
All right, yeah, I would just want to repeat what Ms. Ross just said, and we've had 3 different venues in 3 years. I guess it's 4 different venues in 4 years. So every year, you're kind of having to reinvent graduation, and hopefully we're somewhere where we can stay for a while, because it's an absolutely fabulous place to have graduation. But I'd really like to also thank all the teachers and administrators who take their personal time and show up at graduation to help and just make sure it happens, because it obviously wouldn't happen without all those people spending extra time to make sure that kids are wearing their robes properly and everyone's lined up like they need to be lined up, and reading names, and I mean, all those things have to happen. So thank you so much for all you do to make graduation happen for these kids. All right, open forum number 1. Any cards? Okay. Then I will accept a motion to consider approval of donations.
I move the board approve the June 2022 donations as presented.
I have a motion and a second for the board to approve the June 2022 donations as presented. Please vote. And that motion passes. So at this time, we will pass out certificates of appreciation to those making donations, and those will be read off by Board Vice President Julie Cole.
Nope.
Oh, sorry, Rochelle Ross.
We switched last week, remember?
Yeah.
He's not used to us switching seats yet. So the grand total tonight of our donations is $4,090.21. And like we like to say all the time, we can't do all this without community support and our PTA. So big shout out. Thank you guys so much. First one is presented by Board Member Fred Campos. Spring Creek Barbecue to Meadow Creek Elementary School in the amount of $1,820, which will help purchase new choir risers. This is exciting, and Darla Clark will accept the certificate. Next, we have Board Secretary Julie Cole for presenting to Bedford Heights Elementary School PTA to Bedford Heights Elementary School in the amount of $738, and the donation will go towards the purchase of a water filling station, and Miss Harrell, principal, is here to accept. Yay. Oh, yeah. Hi. She did a great job wrangling all the cats at at the PTA meeting, the last PTA meeting. It got a little crazy, and you were amazing. So good luck next year. Next certificate is presented by Board President Matt Romero, Shady Brook Elementary School PTA to Shady Brook Elementary in the amount of $1,532.21, and the donation will go to a buddy bench for the outdoor play area and a trash can for the playground. And Miss Martin, principal, is here to accept.
We love a good buddy bunch.
We love a good buddy bench. Thank y'all so much.
Okay, thank you for all those giving donations. At this time, the board will adjourn into closed session pursuant to Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. The board will adjourn into closed session pursuant to sections 551.071 to 551.074. There's an extra section on here. And pursuant to section 551.0821. All right, we're in closed session.
Go ahead. I'm gonna grab this, write it down right.
Go ahead, Jim.
right, the board will now reconvene into open session. We are in section 9, action items. I'll accept a motion on item 9.01, consider and take possible action on TEA docket number 120-SE-0122.
In regard to TEA docket number 120 SE 0122, I move the board approve the terms of the agreement reached in this matter.
Second.
I have a motion and a second in regard to TEA docket number 120-SE-0122, that the board approve the terms and agreement reached in this matter. Please vote. Did everyone vote? Okay, well, we'll vote with a show of hands. All those in favor? All those opposed? That motion passes. All right, next item, consider approval of Executive Director of Technology. I will accept a motion.
I move that the board appoint Dr. Lindsay Hopkins as the Executive Director of Technology.
Second.
I have a motion, a second, for the board to approve the appointment of Dr. Lindsay Hopkins as the Executive Director of Technology. Please vote. And that motion passes.
Yeah.
Dr. Hopkins is here with us tonight. If you have anyone that you'd like to introduce, we'd be.
I do. I have my fabulous husband, Matt Hopkins, and then my daughter, Lainey Kate Hopkins. And our son Dean is away at camp, so he couldn't be.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations. All right, item 9.30, 9.03, I will accept a motion.
I move that the board approve the appointment of Shanna Lynn Grindle as the Coordinator of Special Education.
Second.
I have a motion, a second, for the board to approve the appointment of Shanna Lynn Grindle as Coordinator of Special Education. Please vote. And that motion passes. Ms. Grindle, if you'd like to stand up and just introduce anyone who's here with you.
I have my work family, Lauren, Renee, and Cindy, so my family's all in East Texas.
All right. Well, welcome.
Congratulations.
Welcome to the new position. We're happy to have you. All right. Item 9.04, consider approval of the School Health Advisory Council, board-appointed members. I will accept a motion.
I move that the board approve the School Health Advisory Council board-appointed members as submitted.
Second.
I have a motion, a second, for the board to approve the School Health Advisory Council board members as submitted. Please vote.
Can more members still be appointed to this after tonight?
Districts have the option to place limits or rules upon that. We do not. So as long as they go through the application process, more additional parents can join.
All right, well, that motion passed. Do we have any of the members here. See, I saw Dr. Scoggins. Enjoy. Would like to, were any of the parents here this evening? Well, okay, understandable. Well, we'd like to express our gratitude for you taking these positions and representing the board on the shack this year. So thank you very much. All right, 9.05, consider approval of the 2022-2023 salary schedule. Mr. Williams?
Good evening, Mr. Romero, Board of Trustees. As you recall, we've had our budget meetings, individual budget meetings with board members, and as a result of those meetings, it is my pleasure to present to you this evening for consideration the proposed salary schedules for the 22-23 school year. These salary schedules will set the pay ranges for next school year. I'm also happy to include and say that these salary schedules do include a 3% raise for our employees. And of course, being 87% of our budget, it's also important for me to say that the cost of this raise and with the approval of these salary schedules, if you choose to approve, has been considered and is included in our budget that will be presented in August, and it will be a balanced budget.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions?
Sometimes we have to adjust certain years. Did we have to adjust any years this time? Sometimes year 10 was off when we did the 3% because it didn't figure out for some reason. Was there any other adjustments other than just 3% to the entire?
I think we do make those adjustments. I can't tell you right off the top of my head if they're in years adjusted, but yes, you're correct. We do.
I always have a friend that doesn't get the adjustment, so I have an answer for him.
The other thing I could add too is with this approval of these schedules, it will, HEB will have starting teacher salary of $60,000. Which puts us in competition with competition.
That's good.
All right, any more questions? I will accept the motion.
I move that the board approve the proposed 2022-2023 salary schedule, which includes a 3% increase for staff as submitted.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the board to approve the proposed 2022-2023 salary schedule, which includes a 3% increase for staff as submitted. Please vote.
Melby, I started at 6,500, just to let you know how far they've come.
I won't ask you how long ago.
Well, you know how long. Tell them I'm gray hair.
And that motion passes. All right, and next we're going to consider the approval of the 2022-2023 schedule for supplemental duty pay.
Okay, this goes right along with our salary schedules. Whenever we do give a raise, there are also some of these supplemental duties that are impacted by that. And I believe Cicely may want to talk a little bit more about that, or if you have any questions, she would be able to better answer those tonight.
I'll start by asking if there are any questions.
This is something that we began probably 4 years ago, where we would give the supplemental duty amounts the same
Raise.
amount as the raise, right?
Correct.
And prior to that, that wasn't happening, and we were finding ourselves way behind.
Yes.
So now, we should, are you both confident we're all caught up? And, you know, as we continue to do this, this is a good sort of way to do this going forward?
I'll just say that I definitely believe that in those stipends that receive that 3% raise or whatever the raise is, yes, we are very comparable to others. But what I'll also say is we've worked really hard over the last 6 months to basically go line by line through the supplemental duty schedule and look at things that aren't where they should be. And we have spent a lot of time looking at what is being offered in other districts, but also looking internally at ways we can value groups of employees. And I'd love the opportunity to highlight a few of the things that we have really felt needed some attention, and we were able to thanks to your input and assuming that this is approved tonight, we will be able to really get ourselves in a good position, I believe, for all of our rates to be where they need to be. So I'm just going to highlight, I'm not going to go through every change, but I'm going to highlight a few things I think are worth being excited about and things that we will be able to celebrate with employees. So, of course, you have approved a theater arts assistant director, and you see that listed on the first page. So we now have that stipend is in line with other comparable positions, as it should be. Also, on the second page, I'm really proud of the work that we've been doing looking at our substitute compensation. That's an area that we have continually, over the last several years, every couple years, we've increased, but it's been very difficult to keep up. And so really looking at our rates, I'm just going to give you a quick highlight. So first of all, I want you to know that individuals who go through our onboarding process and who take the time to go through our orientation and get their fingerprints and get all the things they need to get done will receive a $100 onboarding supplement once they have worked for us for 10 days as a substitute. So again, an initiative to get them taking jobs. But then what we're really excited about is our non-degreed, non-certified substitutes will get $90, which is a $15 increase. Our degreed certified, our degreed non-certified will get $100, which is a $15 increase. And our degreed and certified will be starting at $110, which is a $15 increase. And actually, as those go up from 1 to 10 days, 11 to 19, and 20 plus, each of those has also seen anywhere from $15 to $20 of an increase. We're very excited about that. We are keeping our supplement in place that we started 2 years ago, where after 20 days they can earn $300, and that applies for all of those levels. The other thing you'll notice, and I know that this has been shared with you, but instead of the requirement that an individual, in order to sub, have 60 plus college hours, we are doing 48 plus college hours. That does not, we don't believe that compromises the quality, but we believe it allows us to compete with other districts for substitutes. Yeah. Also want you to know that our substitute teacher coach for long-term assignments has been at the same rate for many, many years, and we've increased that by $10 a day, moving that up to an additional $25 that someone would get in that role above the basic pay. I also am very excited that our paraprofessionals are seeing a $5 increase, and then the bulk of our paraprofessionals tend to be in special ed because that's where we have paraprofessionals. And so those individuals will see a $15 increase in our sub rate. And we know that's going to serve our students very well. Something we've been really wanting to address and have done so in this supplemental duty schedule is that our elementary teachers serving as a substitute, for the last 2 years, we've been able to give them a COVID stipend when they were filling basically a vacancy for an unfilled sub job. But it was a COVID supplement. We have added that to this supplemental duty schedule because we believe that that is something that will continue to happen, and it doesn't need to just be a COVID supplement. It needs to be something that we do to honor the time that they spend supervising additional students on top of their own. So you see those rates laid out here. And then also our junior high and high school teachers who serve as a sub during their conference period. That rate has not changed in many years. We've increased both of those by $10. Again, wanting to honor the employees who help us in that situation. Also, we are very excited that our part-time temporary rates are all increasing. We have been paying our part-time paraprofessionals and clerical staff $10.50 for several years, and that's going to go up to $12.50. So when we have a part-time employee, that's the baseline. And then along with that, we have also increased the rates for all of our summer help in maintenance and in other areas to make sure that we're giving them a comparable increase. Those who are retirees who work for us in paraprofessional positions will get $16.50, and so that's a $2 increase as well. I think one of the things we're most excited about is an opportunity to honor one of our most essential groups of employees in which we're seeing the greatest gap and the inability to fill positions, and that's our custodians. And so what you will see in the stipend book here is that we will be offering some longevity stipends for our custodians. At 2 years of service, they will begin receiving a $250 annual stipend. At 5 years, that goes up to $500. At 10 years, it goes up to $750. At 15 years, $1,000. At 20, $1,250. And at 25 years, $1,500. We will get this into place beginning in July, and I can assure you this will help us to retain some of our hardest working employees. And then finally, I am I've already mentioned the paraprofessional rate, but I want to go over a degree stipend. So for many, many years, our paraprofessionals and secretaries who have a 30 hours of college get an additional $100 per year toward their salary. 60 hours was $200, and a bachelor's degree was $300 per year. And so we are very excited that this includes for 30 hours or plus, $250 annually, for 60 hours or plus, which is an associate's degree, $500 annually, and for a bachelor's degree, $1,000 annually. So for those who have a bachelor's degree, that is a $700 increase to their stipend. And we also have increased the stipend that we provide to those special education teacher assistants who help with hygiene and health concerns, toileting and things of that area. That is going up from $900 to $1,500, as well it should. And finally, I think this is another one that we believe will really honor some of our hardest working employees, and those are our coaches who we, of course, require to be eligible to drive a bus. And so currently, whenever they are driving, they're getting a very minimal amount of money, but we are increasing this, and when they're driving to an inside the district event, they will get a $15 increase. They will be getting $40 per trip. And then when they are driving to an outside the district event, there's a $40 increase. It will be $80. So these are just some highlights. It's not everything, but I think they're worth mentioning, and we certainly appreciate your consideration.
Just have a question. If I'm a custodian and I just finished my 20th year in May, do I get the money now? Do I have to wait a year, or do I get it in September?
In July. That's correct.
That's going to be a question of when they get the money.
Absolutely. And so that's the other thing I would say is that all of these go into effect. If they're part-time rates, they'll go into effect as soon as they are approved. But then for other things like what you just described, Mr. Cargile, as soon as they are eligible for their first check for the 22-23 school year, that's when we would put them in place. Any questions?
Any questions from the board?
What about 8 years? So I get the 5-year money?
Yes.
All right, I will accept a motion.
I move that the board approve the proposed 2022-2023 schedule for supplemental duty pay.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the board to approve the proposed 2022-2023 schedule for supplemental duty pay. Please vote.
Cicely, what did you use your barometer for? Did you call other districts and kind of see the median, or, I know you had to do some surveying, so how many outside districts did you contact?
So, for example, on subs, I know I prepared that information for you on Friday. I think there were 15 or 16 in that information. Some of these are things we do internally that others don't do. And so really one of the things we looked at is what our priorities were and how much we could spend, and made sure that we stayed within that. So some of these may not be exactly what we would have, preferred or hoped for, but they are certainly getting us in the hunt, so to speak. So what I would say is, with regard to other districts, for any stipend that there are other districts, we always look at anywhere from 5 to 10 districts. And if it's something that others don't offer, then we look at how long it's been since we've increased it, and we try to figure out what the appropriate amount would be to get us back into a competitive area.
All right, that motion is passed. All right, item 9.07 is consider approval of amendment to superintendent contract. This is the time of year that we would traditionally be looking at the superintendent contract, because we would have just gone through a normal superintendent evaluation. But this year, since we have a new superintendent and a new contract, there's no amendments that are required at this time. So we're going to move down to the consent agenda. Does anybody have anything they'd like to remove from the consent agenda? And I will accept the motion.
I move the board approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second that the board approve the consent agenda as presented. Please vote.
That's weird.
Yeah.
Let's do hands.
Do you want us to do hands?
It's acting up.
All right, all those in favor? All right, that motion is passed. All right, on to reports and presentations. Report on employments, resignations, and retirements. Any questions on that report?
I do have a question. Cicely? So now that we are through the school year, how do we compare this year as far as where we were last year on number of retirements, number of resignations that we're seeing?
So we surpassed where we were last year on May 31st with regard to teacher resignations. And we're continuing to see those go up. But what I will say is they've significantly slowed in the last 3 weeks. Keep in mind, our district will be starting a little earlier than other districts on the first day of school this coming year, which means that our penalty-free resignation deadline will be a little sooner, and that'll be June 26th. I would anticipate that we will not see those resignations continue after that. I will tell you that we are above 200 teacher resignations for the entire school year. Now, that's not just folks who've resigned starting in May, but we're above 200. I think we're maybe at 210, which is higher than we've been for the last 3 years, and we still have several weeks to go. I'll also tell you that our hiring has been, I know that's not what you asked, but our hiring has been steadily continuing, and we're seeing success. As of this afternoon, we have 68.5 teacher vacancies, and we had 81 teacher vacancies a week ago. And that's with an additional 12 resignations for teachers.
Thank you for that. And I know that we are doing some analysis on, we lost a bulk of students during COVID, and we're trying to figure out where they went. All right. Now that we've reached the bulk of our retirements for this year, have we been able to draw any themes on, are these concentrated in secondary as compared to elementary? Are they concentrated in any particular schools? Are they leaving for jobs outside of education? I mean, have you been able to draw any themes yet?
I don't have anything that I can tell you percentages, but I can tell you that, yes, I review and sign the resignation letters for every employee, and I write a personal note at the bottom about where they're going, and we try to recapture some of them. So because of that, I can tell you that it's my personal assessment that we are seeing, I would say, out of the 170 that we have hired in the last 10 weeks, I would say that over 50% of those have left the profession, meaning either they are retiring or they are going to work at a location or an organization that allows them to work from home, or what I'm seeing a lot of is I'm taking care of a family member or a new baby. Lots of folks staying home for that reason. I have not seen the same number of resignations for employees going to other school districts as I've ever seen in the past. That number is for sure lower. But of course, what is sad for us is that the number that is highest is those who are truly walking away from the profession. And I'd love to say that it's because they're all retiring. I would say that there is a significant number of those employees who are not retiring. Now, I'll also say there are some that have been retirement eligible for several years and didn't intend to retire, and we've seen them make the decision to retire. So there's been a combination, but the trend that we are seeing is staying home with a sick family member, taking care of a parent, more so than in the past. And then really common has been staying home with a baby or to focus on their children. Those have been higher than normal.
Have you seen an uptick in brand-new teachers, either 1 or 2 years teaching with us?
We will really dig into that data when we do our exit survey report to the executive leadership team, and I'll have more definitive information there. But I will tell you that there are years where we see a little bit more of an increase in those who are 1 to 3 years who are resigning. I'm seeing a lot more of our seasoned teachers who are making the decision to either retire or stay home. Certainly, there's some young teachers young in their careers, who are staying home with, new family members, such as a baby, et cetera. But we're actually seeing a pretty even spread of folks from the beginning of their careers all the way up to the middle and end of their careers.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any additional questions? All right. Any questions on disbursements for the month of May 2022? All right, we are ready for STAR 3 through 8 and EOC report. Dr. Norgard?
All right, I have lots of numbers for you this evening. Because of that, and because I know that you've already had these numbers in front of you, I will move fairly quickly through our slides, but please interrupt me, stop me if there's anything that you want to hear more about that I went a little too quickly by. So these are, of course, related to our strategic plan with meets and masters grade level. I do need to stop on this slide. So context for analysis, before we dive into the numbers, we're going to look at the numbers 2 ways. Usually when I bring you DBA reports, we're looking 2 ways, because we look at, say, if it's a 4th grade test, I'm looking at how did this year's 4th graders do compared to previous years of 4th graders. Then I also look at, well, how did this group of 4th graders do when they were in 3rd grade? So 2 ways. There's 2 ways of looking at the data tonight. In what I'm bringing you, the first is our performance objectives report. And that is every time I brought you a DBA report, we had those little targets, those little stars. Those came from our performance objectives report. I want to make a distinction for you before I begin with the numbers. Our performance objectives report is aligned to the TAPR. Those are our snapshot students. But really, and those goals that I've been giving you, those have been based on snapshot students. But the actual data, those scores on DBAs and the scores I'm going to give you when I get into the bulk of the STAR test this evening, are all of our students. If they were here and they tested with us, they're our student. We're reporting their data because they are important to us. But we need to draw that distinction because TAPR is going to become very important when we're looking at accountability and other things. Then the trend performance, that's going to be all first-time test takers, because also when we get into EOC, you might have a junior that's still testing in English 1 or some other things. So when we report for this data, when we get to the trend, it's all first-time testers, whether they were with us at Snapshot or not. If they took the test, they're in the data. So for performance objectives, I simply represented for you, we met it or we progressed towards the target. So for all of our elementary, we met or exceeded those performance objectives targets when you look at our snapshot students and that snapshot goal. At junior high, we met or exceeded in all areas other than English 1, which we did make progress. It's improved over last year's snapshot data, just didn't quite reach that level of the target. And we'll talk about that when I get to the actual number slide. And then in high school, English 2 at the master's grade level improved but didn't go all the way to that performance objectives target. So that is for POR, but now I'm going to get into the trend performance. And we're going to look for each test very quickly at 2 comparisons. how we did compared to last year. Again, these are different groups of students. So how did our third graders in 2022 do in reading compared to third graders in 2021? Because that's what we're used to doing over the last year. But at the bottom, that was back to the last time we had our normal year, our pre-pandemic. So we've also got two comparisons on each slide. So you'll see that actually for third grade reading, and in fact, when I click through all the reading slides, you're going to see all kinds of green arrows because we have actually returned to the level of performance we were seeing prior to our shutdown. So we'll just, yay. I could have labeled it the Cargyle comparison if that would have. But it is there, and they are green arrows. It does give a different view to the data that we had. So I've got that for you, but I can click really quickly because we see lots of green arrows and lots of smiling faces. Because here's our fourth grade reading, our fifth grade, sixth grade. Fifth grade was from 2019. There would have been 2 administrations. I used first only since we only have 1 now. 6th, 7th, 8th. English 1, this is the one we talked about. Now on performance objectives, so when we're just looking at snapshot students, we did improve.
Hold on a minute.
I know.
Before we talk a lot about red arrows, I just want to talk about the green arrows for a minute.
Absolutely. Let's look at some green arrows.
Because this is, I mean, I have chills. This is truly incredible what these students have done. And they did not do that by themselves. It was the teachers, the administrators, every single employee in this district that has enabled this to happen. I truly didn't think we'd get there until next year. The fact that we're there now is unbelievable. Just had to say that.
And I just realized I wore the wrong color dress for this report. Yes, lots and lots of green arrows. But I will also tell you, thank you for pausing on that, because I was flying right on because I was ready to talk here on our red, because I did want to point out, even though these arrows are red, as you remember from what I said on the performance objectives, when we look at our snapshot students, we were making progress with those groups. We did progress. We didn't hit all the way to the target, but that performance improved for students that were with us all year. These are all students, so this may include some students that, you know, recently transferred to us we didn't have all year. But we also have some perspective here for English 1. When we think about this cohort of students that are currently in 9th grade, the English 1 test has reading and writing. These students didn't take a 7th grade writing test. The last time these students were assessed in writing, they were 4th graders. And I told you when we did the DBA report on this, we were a little worried about compositions with these groups of students. So as we get more detailed reports, we're still in preliminary data right now, as our final reports come back, we are absolutely digging into where do these students need support, because next year they'll be sitting in English 2 and needing to write. However, at the same time, the test is changing. And so the writing they will be asked to do in English 2 is different than the writing they did in English 1.
Right.
So our secondary language arts coordinator will really be digging into this. All of our coordinators, you know, are really targeting this data so that they can give the teachers the best information, that here's where we're going to get that bang for our buck. Our kids were not getting this. They did well with this. To look at where is that overlap. Here is something that they struggled with in writing that is still a major part of the new kind of writing they're going to be asked to do, versus they struggled with this, but that's no longer assessed in the same way. So how do we bridge that weakness into this new type of writing that they will be asked to do? And really, all of our tests, all 3rd through 8th grade STAR and all EOCs, every single one of them has new item types for next year. TEA has not yet told us which new item types they're going to use. Summer, maybe fall, we'll get that information. So we're going to try our best to prepare them for every possible type of new item type. There's up to 10 item types in some areas, but we don't know which ones are going to be on the test yet. But we are going to do our best to address all of those and be sure that they are prepared to deal with that kind of thinking that's required. English 2, improvement or even over last year, but coming back to that 2019. Now, those are single digit. They're small. I kind of want to make the arrows proportional and make some
This
little
way, not
tiny
this way,
arrows.
this way, right, Andy? More like this.
So, but we have some work to do as well with English 2, especially because our students that will be taking English 2 next year are these that I told you. We're struggling some with their writing in English 1. So we'll be digging into that and making sure they have the right kind of support when we start off into the fall. So then we go into math. And as you recall, I've spent many times during the year telling you the research, not just HEB, not just the state, but nationally, math and science are the two that had the greatest loss during the pandemic, not being able to put hands-on materials in math to actually get those manipulatives, not being able to do labs in science. And so these are going to be slower to come back, but let's look at some green arrows because double digits over where we have been. And when you look at where we were pre-pandemic, that's where I want a little bitty arrow, because that's a -1.
Really close, yeah.
Yeah, we are there at meets and masters and almost right there at approaches, but we're going to continue to push and improve past that. 4th grade, again, the only thing that wasn't there at pre-pandemic was only off by 1. And huge gains. Again, we'll see every single one of these, you'll see gains over last year. It's whether or not we're all the way back to where we were pre-pandemic. So we need to put the kinds of actions that got us these year-to-year gains to continue to have another year of growth like that, and we'll be there. 6th grade math, almost there compared to 2019. 7th grade math is struggling a little more to come back. 8th grade. 8th grade is one of our lowest. 8th grade and algebra were our 2 biggest losses last year in math. This is really difficult math when you reach this age. This is where those students that, as Mr. Cargall might say, students don't come for algebra because they struggle. This is some really abstract thought happening in these areas of math. So we really know that they're going to need some support. I've been talking to you throughout this year for intensified algebra that we're piloting next year in place of some of our STAR math classes for that blocked math in 9th grade. So this group of students is rolling up into that program, which is targeted. Really, we knew that this was going to be a struggle. So we are going to be really targeting because it's not just about getting them just over that first hurdle approaches. You see where our big drop where we need that comeback is at meets. We need to get that meets grade level. So it's not just a minimum expectation, it's we need you here because that's what's gonna make you successful in the future. So our Algebra 1, nice gains at meets and masters compared to last year, but still some growth, which that intensified algebra will help.
Dropping from 96%, which is incredibly high to begin with.
Yeah.
Yes, and you'll see
Not a lot
that.
of shame in that. But
You'll see
it's-
that in biology and U.S. history as well. It's like, yeah, when you look where we were, and to say, oh no, we're only at 92.
Yeah.
We're not saying, oh no, we're only at 92. We are, wow, look, we have come back to 92.
Yeah.
But we know we've been even higher.
Yeah.
So we just have those high expectations. We keep pushing. But yes, we absolutely want to stop and celebrate those numbers. So when we look at science, again, not back to where we were pre-pandemic, the same thing. We've got to get our kids putting their hands on experiments, not just reading about them. They need to, you got to do the math, you got to do the science. And in 8th grade as well, and biology. Again, to Mr. Romero's point, we were at 97% approaches in biology. So, yeah, we're 93 and it's a red arrow. So we're gonna get those kinds of gains back again. When we move to social studies, they have a test in 8th grade, which is coming back. It's getting very close. And then the 11th grade U.S. history, again, in 2019, we were 97. These are the numbers that other places in the state were looking to us and going, oh my goodness. So we're going to get some oh my goodness again.
They're still going to say that at
They
95.
They are. Absolutely. Okay. So any questions about any of that data?
Have any questions on this report?
No questions, but just to tag on to Julie, I think that this is really remarkable. I think that the job that the students and the teachers and the administrators have done is out of this world. Absolutely. Everybody in the district was really working hard. I think that we all knew that generally, people were behind coming into this year. I think this shows that we caught a lot of them up. What I'm interested in is the kids who aren't on the page, the kids who aren't even on the approaches. Did they fail at the same rate at which we expected a percentage to fail? My question is, are they further behind than we hoped that they would?
They didn't make it to that threshold, but how close were they to the threshold?
Yes.
We will get more of that data as we get our final reports, because that is really where it becomes so important to look at growth. Because we have students that didn't meet and may still not have reached that approaches, but they grew within that measure. Growth will get classified as either accelerated, expected, limited, or no growth. So that's a different report and different numbers that we bring that are a major part of our accountability. So that's really where we focus, is not just this group of third graders, where are they compared to last year's group of third graders? That's one way of looking at the data. But when we're talking about that improvement, we really want to be looking at growth for our kids, that even if you didn't hit that threshold yet, you are closer than you were previously. So that is data we still have yet to finish finalizing, but that is an important piece to look at and set goals with those students.
Yeah, because basically if you have a kid who didn't reach approaches in fourth grade reading, then you're going to need to grow him or her more than a year for them to be able to reach approaches in fifth grade reading, right?
That is, yes, it's a semi-complicated formula, because they could be approaches and they still meet growth. They could be approaches and meets and they've got accelerated growth. They could be, if they were near the top of the approaches threshold, almost meets, and they're still approaches, but they just barely crossed the approaches, that could have been not growing. So there's just lots of ways to look at it. But yeah, that's where those growth numbers really become important for us, is keep moving forward at least a year every year.
Okay. Any additional questions or comments?
Just so excited about it.
All right, next let's look at the universal screening.
While Ty's getting that up, this one's really a lot of information. So I have grayed out some slides so that the data is in there for you, but I'm not going to pause on all of it. I will say, so universal screeners, these are things that are given 3 times a year. And so this is, within this report, a reading and a math indicator for every single K through 6th grade student. When we added that MAP growth, the new test that year, that means we are putting eyes on these students to really see where they performing, not just waiting for a DBA or STAR, and especially for our K1 and 2, because these are the measures that we look at for them. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to our year-to-year comparison. So these are our our just completed kindergartners, our rising first graders, how they performed compared to previous years of kindergartners. So we see green arrows, and they are reaching those targets. For our students that just completed first grade, they have improved over the performance we were seeing from first graders last year. They have met all of their targets. But when we look at our second graders rising to third, they have improved, except in TRC. That's a -1. It's very close. But from where we were with the targets, we missed those performance objective targets by a few points in our Spanish, the ADEL, so the phonics side in Spanish, and TRC, which is combined English and Spanish. So these second graders went on spring break as kindergartners and never came back to school. First grade, many of them stayed online the entire year. So this has been, a lot to climb back from in second grade, but we are very aware they are now rolling up into third grade in their first year of STAR testing. There are interventions in place for them that, especially now that we have added MAP growth, while reading 3D is only K1 and 2, in third grade we usually be waiting for a DBA or something before we get that first data point. We're going to have a MAP growth data point at the beginning of the year for these students as well, to really look at instructional levels, form those small groups, get them where they need to be. And I think I just talked through this slide, so that's where I was. Questions about reading 3D? Okay, let's jump to math. So our math, the numbers are much different. We spent more time when we first reported M-Class for this year, so I did skip by the context, but let me remind you, this is a new screener in the state of Texas, came out after House Bill 3. It is not as refined and polished. It is from Amplify, our same publisher of our reading assessment. They are still tweaking this assessment, particularly in the cut points. How high should a student be able to count in 60 seconds? And we have sent some feedback to them. It's one of the reasons we picked this company, because they were very receptive when we provided feedback on reading. They are looking at adjusting these numbers. So we're seeing growth, but we're not celebrating the 45%. We're celebrating that we got 17 points of gain, because we feel like probably both of those numbers should have been focused on a different cut point. But we also saw very large gains in first grade and in second grade compared to the previous year's performance. So we think as M-Class continues to refine their assessment and those cut points, like I said, we were nervous when we first saw these scores, and then we talked to other districts that used M-Class assessment. We thought, wow, we look pretty good. So it is an issue with the standard within the assessment. The pieces of the assessment are good. It's just how high they expect students to get at those certain cut points. So we're going to continue with concrete models and tools, and also a big shift for our, not a shift, a big additional layer of support that's being added into our elementary math this year. We do have our elementary math coordinator, Gary Adcox, with us this evening, is language supports. Every lesson in the curriculum is going to have language supports for our emergent bilingual students. You know, our students that English is not their first language. Math is not just numbers. They've got to be able to read it. So how do we offer that appropriate support? Questions about M-Class math? Okay, so map growth. Remember, this is where you have to shift your thinking. This is not criterion referenced where everybody can get the same score and yay, we all made 100. It's being ranked in comparison to each other. Where did you fall compared to other people's performance? So there's always going to be some at the low end, some at the high end. It's just a distribution. The smaller the orange and red we have, the better we're doing. So we can see, here's how we did across the 3 test points in third grade reading. I'm about to talk about growth, and we mentioned earlier in the report about growth on STAR. Growth when we're talking about MAP is across this norm, this bell curve. So anytime that we have 50% meeting or exceeding growth, we're beyond the norm. We're to the right side. It's just a different way of thinking, because sometimes you'd see 50% and go, ooh, not good, only half of our students did. When you think about a bell curve, that is the expectation. So our third grade reading, 56% of our third graders met or exceeded their growth projection across the school year. So these would have to be students that we had at BOY and EOY. If we only had one or the other score, we couldn't calculate that growth for those students. We still have, I don't know what just happened. There it goes. Okay. All right. Dangers of talking with your hands. This was one I was most excited to see. We talked this year and we said we'll have to live through a whole year and see what this does for us, that MAP growth gave us a projected STAR proficiency, because STAR is a criterion reference test. The MAP was this norm reference, but it's done a linking study, and we said, I want to see it with my own eyes and see how well it projected. So you can see the STAR performance is what is blocked out, which was actually higher, and you'll see that on every single one of the slides. The actual STAR performance was higher than the projected proficiency, so that's good. You know, we want to keep shooting for that higher target. There may be some extra attention or motivation on a STAR day versus our EOY this year, because STAR was so late in the year. EOY was the last week of school, so field day and some other things happening when they're going to sit down within their reading class and take a MAP test online may or may not have had the same sense of urgency as their STAR testing day. So it's pretty consistent when you look. The STAR projected proficiency was pretty level across the year in almost all of our grades. But so we do feel like this could be a good measure for us to look at going forward. So then in fourth grade, we can see across the year how we moved within those quintiles. 48% of our fourth graders met or exceeded their growth projection across the school year. Now remember, this is growth from MAP, growth comparing them to other students, how you grew compared to how other students grow. When we get STAR and EOC growth, that's how did I grow compared to how I was last year. So we use the same words in different contexts. I just want to make that clear. So again, you can see these trend lines that in every one of them, the star is going to be higher than the projected proficiency, which is always good. I'd rather be surprised in that direction.
Holly, can I interrupt you a second?
Yes.
You have to note here that the Spanish reading is not done. What percentage is that, or how many kids is that? Ballpark.
16 of our fourth graders tested in Spanish.
Okay.
I knew it was in here somewhere. I had
Okay,
to go
that's all
find
right.
that slide. So a very small percent, but I did want to note that the math side, the English and Spanish is an exact translation. Reading the English and Spanish STAR tests are different tests because you take an English passage and just translate it into Spanish, you may have made it more difficult, you may have made it easier. They're different tests. So then sixth grade reading, I went a little fast there, 44% better exceeded their MAP growth projection. So comparing them to other sixth graders, we'll see a different number once we get our STAR growth because it'll be compared to myself. How did I grow compared to last year? And same thing. This one approaches, we hit right on the money at beginning of year compared to where we ended the year on STAR. Then we slide over to math. We see shrinking orange and red as we move towards the end of the year. 67% of our third graders met or exceeded the growth projections. So that's big. That's a lot more than 50%. Again, thinking about the bell curve, not 100%. Here we can see, again, we extended at math. We see more at approaches was a little closer. So the ones that were performing right there were right there. The ones that had that capability and really pushed themselves to masters on STAR. You may remember I told you MAP's that computer adaptive testing. It's going to keep them going. The more you get, the harder it's going to give you questions, and may have decided in the last week of school that those questions had gotten hard enough and may not have put the same attention into that MAP EOI that they did on their STAR. Fourth grade, we see the orange shrinking. 51% of our fourth graders met or exceeded their growth projection. Again, the approaches stayed really close to the MAP projection, but we picked up at meets and masters. Our fifth grade, 46% met or exceeded growth projection. Again, approach is really close. We didn't see as much difference, but meets and masters, students really pushing themselves at STAR to those high levels of performance. And our sixth grade, 56% met or exceeded their growth and saw, much like reading on all three levels, higher at STAR at all three thresholds. Questions about MAP growth? All right. Thank you, guys. That was a lot of slides from me.
All right, does anyone have any more questions for Dr. Norgard?
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you. And ESSER 3 grant framework for 2022-2023. Mr. Streeter.
Yes, good evening. So once again, I somehow always seem to draw the card after Holly. That's rather intimidating. She may be one of the smartest people I know, so Holly, thank you for those amazing reports. I always feel smarter when she leaves my office, and then it happens fast. So before I continue, what I do want to point out, and I'm going to go through these slides rather quickly because most of this information you're relatively familiar with. It's just how we've been spending our money, so I'm not going to read them to you. I'm going to highlight very quickly. But it's very, very important to talk about what Holly just shared with you. And I know that you all know the impact of those scores, and I will say those are going to be unique, and we have a lot to be proud of. And when you talk about everyone that's been involved, teachers on the ground level, our principals and our assistant principals, making sure that kids are in class, chasing them down, finding them, getting back into the class, parent contact. I mean, it isn't just about what's happening on the academic side. It's about getting those kids in the classrooms, which goes back to what Andy talks about all the time, is we also had great performance in our athletics and fine arts. It makes a difference. The next thing is, what I'm showing tonight with the ESSA and the ESSER, really the bottom line is, were we fiscally responsible with our money, and did we use our money on one of two things? Was it for things, or was it for kids? And I wish Mary was here tonight to present this for us, because you know what her saying is, it's all about the people, right? Well, people make the difference, and we invested our money in people which directly impact kids. And really, that's the short of this presentation. There's not a lot to say on it. Every Student Succeeds Act, this is just different pots of money. Title I, we have 18 elementary schools that receive it, around $4.1 million. And again, that's used for elementary campus reading and math, instructional specialists who provide PD. You just saw the scores. Hopefully, that validates how we spent some of that money, because clearly those people are supporting kids and teachers. Title II, that's for professional development. We're helping our teachers get better. We're identifying their needs and what they can do to help students and reach them and improve our scores, which is Holly's team and department. And we spent about $700,000 on that last year. And again, that's implementation for the classroom, going back to what kids need. Title III, the funding was about $424,000, and that is for our English-speaking, our limited English-speaking students. And as you know, that number is growing every single year, and that's an area that we're actually tackling. Henry and I and Holly and Darla met today, and we've got a great plan we're going to roll out to you in a few months to talk about how we're going to help our students who are emerging bilinguals, because our number is increasing significantly, and we're going to be ahead of the curve, not behind it. Title IV, it's the whole child. How do we help the whole kid? $252,000, and most of that has been used to supplement some of our folks with District Crisis and Prevention Team, the Julia Harris's. And let me tell you, if there's ever been a need for that money, it's been the last 2 years. And they have done monumental work. What you may not know is how well they've worked to create the threat assessment. But when we do a threat assessment on a child, it's not just about finding what's wrong, it's about how can we help them. Yeah. It's going into the schools and meeting that team, and I'm going to include Ray and Marie Becker on that as well. They go out and they help, and even when they bring those kids back, maybe to a DAP for a disciplinary setting, they're also working on how can I help this kid emotionally. And that is fundamental to keeping our kids in school, but also preventing things later on down the road. ESSER, Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief. You all know we got these funds a few years ago, a large sum, and I'm very proud of how we're spending it. For 2021, we got about $20.5 million. And some of that we used to supplant some of our salaries at core academic. So that was helping our teachers at the high school. And this grant is fully completed, and it is on the website.
Yeah,
yes, sir.
ESSER 1 is the one the state kept, and then so we had to then use, they didn't give us the money, so basically they withheld that amount, and then when we got the money, it had to replace what they did not give us. So they took that away. So at the end of the day, we really didn't see any ESSER 1.
Yeah, it was kind of a wash. ESSER 2, around $10.2 million for 20 to 22. And again, that was for the 21-22 and a limited amount of funds to help us with the $1,000 additional compensation that you all helped and approve. I believe that was last year. ESSER 3, almost $30.6 million for the 4 years, and that's due to the COVID-19. And we've spent approximately $10 million for each year. And again, you know that we've used that on summer school, we've used that on intervention, tutoring, in every possible way. And almost all of those pennies have gone back into the classroom, or we've gotten teachers to go in and be interventionists. And it is working. And luckily, we have another year or so to go on that. So some of the staff that we've hired, you know, elementary full-time interventionists, STAR and EOC teachers, ESL teachers, special education staff, and teachers on special assignment. And that's the other thing I really want to compliment Holly and her team is, you know, we've identified, their team has identified some areas that we weren't growing the way we wanted to. So she went and picked some of the best teachers in the district. She's pulled them in. And let me tell you what, I walk by every single day their office, and I've never seen two ladies work. I mean, I get here at 7:30, they're before me. I leave here at 5:30, they're still here. I'm here at a football game, and sometimes they're here in the fall. I've never seen more sticky notes on a wall. They surround the entire room with sticky notes, and they are mapping out from day 1 to day 187 of instruction. And you know what? It's going to make a difference, but it's because people have been identified, and we've used the money to do root cause analysis, and it's amazing. And then finally, academic recovery plan. You all know this. We've worked for social and emotional health, ESL teachers, SPED staff, summer school, technology, tutoring, and additional instructional materials. We can't always use what we had if we're trying to grow and improve kids from the deficit that they've come from. And so we've had to be creative, and we've went out and either created them or we've purchased them through a lot of analysis with a great team. Any questions? That was pretty fast, but I think you're pretty familiar with most of that information.
Any questions from the board on that report?
I don't have a question, but something came to mind as I was reading this yesterday. I'm not going to call out any legislator by name, but there are a couple of them on the Public Education Committee who have said, you don't need any more money. You've got enough money. What I think this proves is that funding, if used correctly, does show what we want it to show, and it can make a huge impact. So I'd love to think about how we can take some of this information along with what we just looked at and correlate. We got this federal funding, and this is what we did with it. And to help us to sell them on the idea that once this federal funding is gone, help us with some funding.
Well, and I think that goes back to the very intent from the very beginning, as we talked about a 3-year plan. And let's be very clear, we still have a lot of kids that have deficits and are going to require the next 2 or 3 years, going back to Chris's question, you know, how much of a deficit, how close are they to approaches, or how far away are they? We have lots of kids that still need help. But what is different about us is it's the systems approach, right? It's we bring in Dobie, we bring in Cicely and Darla and soon to be Brandon and Dr. Harrington and Renee, and we bring in the whole team. And when we sit down and we look at our dollars, we say, how can we spend this money that impacts kids directly? And then we go to the little genius down the hall, Dr. Mary Morris, and she does her wizardry work and finds every penny, and I mean every penny, and she won't let us spend it unless we're sending it to kids. And I firmly believe that is so different than what many districts have done.
That's right,
We didn't
but-
buy materials, we bought person power.
Right, and I'd like to put together some type of document, with your help.
Of course.
With Mr. Williams' help, that talks about that we can put in front of the legislators, put in front of the Public Education Committee and say, this is real. This is what happens when you give us money.
Yep, fiscally responsible, super important, so, thank you. Any additional questions? Thank you.
Any more questions? All right. All right, we have a long list of action items. There was nothing removed from the consent agenda, so we will consider approval of advanced classes identified as no pass, no play exemptions for 2022, 2023. Any questions on this? I'll accept a motion.
I move that the board approve the advanced classes identified as no pass, no play exemptions as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the board to, let's see. Sorry, I had the wrong screen up.
1202.
I have a motion and a second for the board to approve the advanced classes identified as no pass, no play exemptions as presented. Please vote. That motion passes. 12.03, consider approval of Education Service Center Region 11 contracts for 2022-2023. Any questions? I will accept the motion.
I move that the board approve the proposed Education Service Center Region 11 contracts as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the board to approve the proposed Education Service Center Region 11 contracts as presented. Please vote. And that motion passes. Let's see, item 12.04, consider approval of Education Service Center Region 11 Master Interlocal Agreement.
I move that the board approve the master interlocal agreement with ESC Region 11 Purchasing Cooperative as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the board to approve the Master Interlocal Agreement with ESC Region 11 Purchasing Cooperative as presented. Any discussion on that? Any questions? Please vote. That motion passes. Consider approval of RFP 22-05 custodial supplies and equipment. Any questions? I'll accept the motion.
I move that the board approve all responding vendors for RFP 22-05 custodial supply and equipment.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the board to approve all responding vendors for RFP 22-05 custodial supplies and equipment. Please vote. That motion passes. We're down to our annual paper purchases. Consider approval of RFP 22-06 hand roll towels and soap. Any questions? I'll accept the motion.
I move that the board approve Pollock Aurora for hand roll towels and soap.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. The board approve Pollock Aurora for hand roll towels and soap. Please vote. That motion passes. Item 12.07, approval of RFP 22-07 paper towels and toilet tissue. I will accept the motion if there's no questions.
I move that the board approve Complete Supply to provide both towels and Dent's Enterprises Select for toilet tissue.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the board to approve Complete Supply to provide both towels and Dent Enterprise Select for toilet tissue. Please vote.
I feel like a third grader.
We're doing important work here. It's important. Can't run a school without toilet tissue.
No way.
Right.
Impossible.
And that motion passes. Item 12.08, consider approval of RFP 22-13 third-party transportation services. Any questions? I'll accept the motion.
I move that the board approves the Even Driven, formerly known as ALC Schools LLC, as primary vendor and Hop Skip Drive Inc. as secondary vendor for the service.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the board to approve Ever Driven, formerly known as ALC Schools LLC, as a primary vendor and Hop Skip Drive Incorporated as a secondary vendor for this service. Please vote. And that motion passes. Consider approval of Tarrant County Tax Collection Agreement for collection of taxes for 2022 through 2024. Any questions on this item? I'll accept a motion.
I move that the board approve the agreement for the collection of taxes with the Tarrant County Tax Assessor Collector for the 22 through 2024 tax years. Also, the board gives signing authorization to Dobie Williams, Deputy Superintendent of Business Operations, on the agreement for the collection of taxes.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the board to approve the agreement for the collection of taxes with Tarrant County Tax Assessor Collector for the 2022 through 2024 tax years. Also, the board gives signing authorization to Dobie Williams, Deputy Superintendent of Business Operations, on the agreement for the collection of taxes. Please vote. And that motion passes. Item 12.10, consider approval of Amendment 4 to AIA B 102-2007, standard form of agreement between owner and architect. Any questions? I'll accept the motion.
I move the board approve amendment number 4 to AIA B 102-2007, standard form of agreement between owner, HEB-ISD, and architect Huckabee and Associates, Inc.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the board to approve amendment number 4 to AIA B 102-2007, standard form of agreement between owner, HEB-ISD, and architect Huckabee and Associates Incorporated. Please vote. And that motion passes. Consider approval of Edgenuity license renewal. Any questions? I'll accept a motion.
I move that the board approve the quote from Ingenuity Inc.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the board to approve the quote from Edgenuity Inc. Please vote. And that motion passes. Item 12.12, consider approval of Memorandum of Understanding between HEB-ISD and Juvenile Board of Tarrant County. Any questions? I'll accept a motion.
I move the board approve the 2022-2023 Memorandum of Understanding between HEB-ISD and the Juvenile Board of Tarrant County.
Second.
I have a motion and a second that the board approve the 2022-2023 Memorandum of Understanding between HEB-ISD and the Juvenile Board of Tarrant County. Please vote. And that motion passes. Consider approval of TK Education Consulting. Seems like there should be more to that. Any questions on this item?
So I do have one question. So this starts 4 schools in our cohort 3, year 1. So which 4 schools are we choosing?
So the 4 schools that we'll bring on this year are Arbor Creek, North Euless, Oakwood Terrace, and Trinity Lakes.
Okay. And so which schools have not yet participated at all? And are they in line to start the following year?
That would be up to you guys, if you want to approve that, going forward. That would be my hope, because we're seeing great results with our campuses that are working with TK Ed coaches.
Can you talk a little bit about, and you I think you have some of this data, the schools who have participated with TK compared to the schools who have not participated
Right.
participated with TK.
Thank you, Cicely. Have that
And-
written down, actually.
And some of the scores that we're seeing.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah. So you guys had on your Friday update some information that 91% of the LTEP schools had greater than 5% gains on meets passing level from last year to this year. And our non-LTEP campuses had 79.5%, 5% or more growth over last year to this year. And then of our LTEP campuses, 60% had greater than 15% in their meets passing percentage from last year to this year. And for our non-LTEP campuses, it was 46.5%. So,
And I think that's justification enough to continue this. I mean, that we're seeing a return on this investment. So, and I think that's important to bring out.
yes, I agree, definitely. I'm very, very pleased with the work.
So it's a program that's obviously working for us, but bringing on 4 schools at a time, I'm sure that has a lot to do with our side as well, that there's only so much that we can, in terms of incorporating it into a certain number of schools a year? Or?
Right, and the cost of it, and, how much they can add on. They're a fairly new company. As you know, they came off of Teaching Trust. TK founded TK Ed Consulting, I believe, in January of 2020. So it's not new work, but it's a new company, and so they're growing. She's adding staff this year, and they can't take on everybody. We were one of their first that they took on, and so they give us first dibs, so to speak. But they're expanding, and just as far as what their pricing is, and consultants are not cheap, as you know. And so we decided to just bring on 4 more this next year. So that would leave, we still have 7 to go, because we had 10 total this year, 5 that started the first year, And then Veridium was one of those. And we kind of dropped them off because that had a change in leadership, completely new people. So it would have been kind of starting all over with them. And their results were growing. So we're down to 5, is that right? From that first year, down to 4, 4. And then we added 6 this past year, which brought us to 10. We bring 4 more on, then we're at 14, so we still lack 7.
So what was the process to identify these 4 particular schools for this, for this year?
Good question. So we looked at the data. We looked at who was not getting distinctions, who was not getting the growth that we would expect. Not that they weren't getting any, but we would like to see more. And so that's how they were selected.
Okay. And so we don't have the contract in front of us. We have the proposal. So I think it's my understanding, I just want to make sure that this proposal will be appended to the same contract that's in place right now, and the actual contractual language is not changing.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Correct.
Great.
Okay, Darla, since we had first dibs, how come we didn't dib 5 or 6?
That's,
It's about funding, right?
yeah,
Sounds like it's also about their staffing too.
right. I mean, could we take on more? That's not something we've explored. We kind of decided on 4 based on the pricing and, you know, that's always something we could consider if you guys
Well,
are
our
wanting to.
pricing, our capacity to manage them and their capacity. I mean, we could reach out again and look if that is,
Yeah, I don't know if they could, and actually, yeah, it's kind of a two-way. Well, they're in the process. They're in the process. When I talked to TK, I believe it was last week, they're in the process of hiring a couple of additional coaches because they're growing. More districts want to partner with them.
Have we hit,
Once HEB does well, I imagine there's quite a few districts
Sure.
that want.
Probably so.
have we been pretty consistent with the coaches that they have assigned to us? Are they the same group of people, or is there turnover there?
Right. Well, it's pretty new with us, so yes, very consistent. And I will say they have gone above and beyond working with us. They guaranteed a certain amount of touch points. I think it was 10 to 12 per campus, and they well exceeded that. They went above and beyond. Anytime our principals wanted to reach out, they were available. Anytime I wanted to reach out, they were available. They gave us additional coaching sessions. They gave us more than we contracted for.
Any additional questions?
Just, I would add that, not necessarily that we do it, but Joe, we'd be interested in escalating this.
Well, if nothing else, the following year, make sure we get the rest
Yeah,
of the campuses.
maybe we get the rest of the campuses or look at possibilities if they've got staffing. I realize there's money and continuance on this, but this is obviously working and it's a good program.
I can have Darla reach out specifically if we wanted to try to go from 4 to 6 to see if they could meet that capacity, again, putting us a little closer to that end number. I'll see if I can get that turnaround as quick as possible. We'd have to approve that at the July 11th, but I think
We can approve these 4 now, and then if there's capacity for more, we can discuss
we can
adding
add,
more at
so
a future
approve
meeting.
this, and then we could look at additional amendment. Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree, because the only thing that here, they've said, we're getting a 20% discount this year. That's not going to be here next year. So if we can take advantage of that.
Right.
It makes sense, but only to the extent that they're not
Overstretched.
getting out over their skis as far as people,
Right.
and neither are we. I mean,
Right.
we don't want to do something that we don't think we can do well.
Right, and they feel the same way. I know through discussions with TK that she has been selective up to this point of knowing the amount of staff she has and what they can take on. They don't want to stretch themselves so thin that they're not effective. So it would definitely be something we'd need to talk about with her.
All right, if there aren't any more questions, I'll accept a motion.
I move the board approve the TK Education Consulting proposal as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the board to approve the TK Education Consulting proposal as presented. Please vote. And that motion passes. Item 12.14, consider approval of MAP Growth K through 12 licenses. Any questions? See, the recommended action is a little different than the description. Is that correct?
It just says K-12, it says 3
Says-
through 6, but I don't know if that's a matter.
K-12 is,
Is it because K-12 is the name of the company?
The name of the assessment is K-12. It's available K-12. We're choosing to use it 3-6, and we're only using it for math and reading at this time. It also has other tests. So
Okay.
it's 3-6 is what we want it for.
one up. And
I move that the board approves the purchase of MAP growth license for elementary campuses grade 3 through 6.
second.
I have a motion that the board approve the purchase of MAP growth licenses for elementary campuses grades 3 through 6. Any discussion? Please vote. And that motion passes. All right, consider approval of out-of-state, out-of-country student travel. Any questions on this item? I'll accept a motion.
I move that the board approve the out-of-state, out-of-country student travel as presented.
Second.
I have a motion, and a second, for the board to approve the out-of-state, out-of-country student travel as presented. Please vote. That motion passes. It's time for us to look at financial statements for the month of April 2022. Mr. Williams.
Okay, I know y'all are excited about this. Anybody need to stand up, stretch, do anything? That was a lot of approvals.
Keep on rolling.
Thank you very much. So, Ty, let's roll it. We have the, and I'll try to get through these quick as I can, and you get it this time of night and everybody's ready to get home. But it's really a pretty quiet month in the business finance side. But we're going to look at the April 30th, 2022 financial statements. Go through that really quick. General fund, you can see a fund balance of $203,825,625. That represents revenues over expenditures of $60,956,302. Total expenditures as of 4/30 are at 56.96% of the budget. You can see 8/12 of the year is 67%, so well under that. Overall expenditures are down slightly, as I've said, month after month due to this payroll reclassification to ESSER 2 funds, which we will hit on a couple of slides here in a minute too that also bounce off of that. But all in all, everything is tracking very normally for this time of the year, winding down the year in the general fund. Now moving on to the Wrestler report. That can be found on page 7 of your financials. Payroll is at $97,334,240 for the period, which is 86%. You typically hear me say 87% is the norm, and that is the norm. But this is a little less than 87 because of the payroll reclassification. So that skews our numbers just a little bit, and excuse that next one too. The utilities is running at 3%, which is typically runs about 2%, that $2,909,364. And instructional supplies, our third largest expense, is running at $1,578,956.
What's gas gonna cost us?
Yeah, good
What's the
question.
impact on the budget on the gasoline starting this next year? Is it gonna be a big impact on our budget?
If it stays, yes,
That's a lot of gasoline for our buses.
it is a lot of fuel. We're gonna have to look at readjusting and,
Now, aren't we in a group, we're in a group with electricity, I think. A group of districts, aren't we, for electricity?
yes, I think we have some cooperative
Yeah.
purchasing
Are we in that way
agreements
in
with
gas also?
I don't think we are. I can find that out. I don't know. I know some districts get in like the TASB co-op purchasing on fuel, and I don't know off the top of my head if we are in a co-op for that. But I will say it's going to cost more.
Yep.
But those I've been in those agreements in the past, and sometimes they're great, but if they're going the wrong way, they will bite you. So it gets you sooner or later. Fuel costs are going to get you. You might put it off a year or two if you're in one of those agreements, but it's going to catch up. Food service fund. Again, every month I talk about what a great job Mariella's doing. You can see fund balance, $9,329,123. That's 2.946777. Revenues over expenditures. Total expenditures as of 4/30 are at 58.09% of the budget. Again, 8/12 is 67%, so well below that. Again, exceptional job by Mariella, and it's easy to point this one out because it is a standalone budget. I would also like to point out and say Jonathan James and his crew, custodial crew, are also doing a fantastic job with the number of people they have to do the jobs. And that's buried within our general fund budget, so I don't always point that out, but I'd be remiss if I did not. So anyway.
Now, those guys, everyone in that department has been
Yes.
working
Work,
themselves.
yes,
Silly.
yes, doing a great job. And kudos to our teachers and other staff too. I mean, everybody's chipping in, putting out trash cans in the hall, doing whatever needs to be done to get it done. The debt service fund, fund balance $43,556,101. That is $30 million revenues over expenditures of $30,575,424. Again, we've made our February payment. We will make our final debt payment for the year coming up in August 15th. We have surpassed the amount of collections we've needed already to make that final debt payment, so we are in really good shape there. So, pre-K CK program, fund balance $275,635. That represents revenues over expenditures of $255,620. That program, again, tracking as normal. It's at 64.2% of the budget, again compared to 67% for 8/12 of the year. Special revenue funds, you can reference those on pages 16 through 18. As I say every month, those are self-sufficient, money in, money out type budgets. The $5.7 million deficit mainly due to the $6.3 million in ESSER 2 payroll reclassification that we've done for 8 months. We do a little bit more every month, and you'll see that through the end of the year until we get that all reclassed. Those expenditures represent 35.66% of the budget. So what you can expect is we will roll some funds forward in a lot of those funds to be available for next year. And that's typical for federal funds. Campus activity funds, $3,053,192 represents revenues over expenditures of $100,673. That fund is tracking very normally. It did really well as compared to the last couple of years. Bond fund, $26,991,096. Of course, we're only spending money out of this because we're not issuing any bonds. So expenses are greater than revenues of $6,283,420, and most of the expenses are finishing up for retainages and on these completed projects, and we've just about paid all of those out, and the remainder of those bond funds will be used on the Bel Air rebuild. So we're estimating a little over $22 million that we're going to be able to apply towards Bel Air, which helps us on this fund, the locally defined projects fund. Fund balance $47,806,061. Again, expenses over revenues because unless we put funds, the board puts funds into this account, and it has no revenue. Expenses of $625,225. Most of these are currently, or these funds are currently being used for the transition center remodel, which is progressing along, and the other projects we approved at the November facilities meeting.
When do we move money to offset that?
We may bring something maybe next month. We can do it anytime. Sometimes, typically, a lot of districts will do that in August, right before the end of the fiscal year, but we can actually do it whenever the board decides to, or whenever we bring something and the board decides to approve that. So Joe and I can talk about that, and we can certainly bring that next month, or we can wait till August, whatever would be the preference. There's no set time to do it, though.
It just looks bad, doesn't it?
It's,
Yeah, you show a deficit on it. I mean, you're showing a deficit, so it should be balanced out, it seems like.
we can fix that. Y'all can fix that.
Well, and is our surplus that we rolled over at the end of last year's budget still sitting in the general fund? That we
Yes,
haven't
it just
moved yet
rolled, it just
to-
rolled into fund balance. And this is actually part of the fund balance, another fund balance. So it's basically just moving it from one fund balance to another fund
But-
balance.
but
It's basically, it's designating funds. It's a way to control your fund balance. We don't want to keep too much fund balance in our fund balance. So we can designate those funds to capital improvements, so that they're allocated. You're saying as a board, we are setting these funds aside to do these specific projects. Doesn't mean you have to do those projects, but you're setting the funds aside to do those type projects.
Had we not identified that we would move a portion of that surplus to the capital improvement fund, locally defined capital improvement fund?
In the past, they've always moved a certain amount of money. Basically, they have, the rollover funds, which we roll over 10% of unused budgets. They usually try to roll those over every year. It's a budget management tool.
So you're asking, is there a designated amount sitting in fund balance right now that hasn't yet been rolled over that we've already discussed?
Yes.
There's, out of that 20 million, by the time we did roll forwards and move money into the transition grant, set aside funds and all that, we had left about 8 million, is that right? Yes, about 8 million that we could comfortably roll into this fund.
So there's 8 million sitting in fund balance right now that could be rolled into our locally defined.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's roll it over from last year before we get to a surplus for this year.
Okay, that works for me.
So that's something that we can discuss.
We'll bring that forward at the next
month.
meeting. Back to locally defined, where were we? I think we basically got done.
Any
so
questions on the financial statements?
I'm tired too.
All right, this is also an action item this evening, so I will accept the motion.
I move the board approve the budget transfer and amendment request for June 2022.
This is financial statements.
Oh, sorry. See, I'm trying to get out of here. I move the board approve the financial statements for April 2022.
Second.
I have a motion, a second, for the board to approve the financial statements for the month of April 2022. Please vote.
It's pretty hot in here.
And the financial statements are approved. Consider approval of budget transfer and amendment request for consideration in June 2022.
These are very normal budget transfers for this time of year. Most of them are just for moving your money around at the end of the year to cover different accounts. So very, very small amounts in the big picture of things.
Any questions? I will accept the motion.
Okay, now I move the board approve the budget transfer and amendment request for June 2022.
Second.
I have a motion, a second, for the board to approve the budget transfer and amendment request for June 2022. Please vote. That motion passes. All right, our final action item, consider approval of District of Innovation amendments and renewal. Dr. Harrington.
I put my name down in case there were any questions. We've had the District Innovation has been brought forward the last couple of weeks through the Friday update, but I did want to see if there were any questions. The DLIC did approve the updated, amended and to renew the plan on May 12th. So the next step in the process was to bring it to the board.
All right, any questions? I'll accept a motion.
I move that the board approve the District of Innovation Plan as submitted.
Second?
I have a motion and a second that the board approve the District of Innovation Plan as submitted. Please vote. And that motion passes. All right. Any cards for open forum number 2, Ms. Hollander? No. All right. We are into other business. Does any board member have an item they'd like to have added to a future board agenda?
I have one, and this is for Conrad, since you're doing both jobs. I had a lot of phone calls and emails about, since Uvalde happened, about safety on our campus. And I know we get the code of conduct, and we get to look at the code of conduct, but since we're a data-driven district, I would like a report from Trinity. I think we used to do it on Cognos, I don't know if you have that now. But I want to know how many kids were punished for tardies, how many kids were punished for class cuts. I want to know how many kids were punished for insubordination and or misbehavior. I want to know how many kids were punished for classroom disruptions. I want to know how many kids were punished for cussing. I want to know how many kids were punished for fighting. I want to know how many kids were punished for threats. I want to know how many kids were punished for mission D-halls. I want to know how many kids were punished for weapons. I want to know how many kids were punished for drugs. I want how many incidents police officers were involved in. I know 2 were arrested at Trinity. I also want to know the number of kids that were punished that were re-offenders, that went twice or got 2 D-halls or 2 AEP assignments or 2 SOS assignments. I know that AEP used to put out a chart of who could go to AEP. I don't know if they still do that, but they used to give every school a chart. If that chart's available, I also like to see that chart. You know, somewhere we're missing something. A lot of parents are upset. I was at a baseball game Saturday morning, and I can't repeat what the guy said to me. I'm in front of all the parents. And so I want to know the data. Something's happening. Parents are upset. They're worried about their kids. I want to know the punishment, which all of these incidents are happening, and what's happening to the kids. Something's amiss. And then, Conrad, I want you to present to us, you know, we didn't find out about the 9th grade super team until May. I think it started discussion in February. We found out in May. You have to be working on this stuff now. I know you are. I want to know where you are, what you're looking at, and maybe you've already decided, I'm not sure. But I want to know the progression today, not the first day of school. I don't know where we are because parents are worried. They're all upset. They're worried about their kids getting hit, getting fights, you know, whatever. So they know the code of conduct, but this is funny. They don't know the data of what happens to kids when they break the code of conduct. And do you have to cut 20 classes to go to AEP? Or is it 3 or 5? I know what it was when I was there, but are they coordinating? Are they all doing the same thing? So I know you can do it on computer. We did it when I was there, unless they're not doing it anymore. We always checked our data. And so if you want to get with me after we're over with, and I can give you this, and then you can get back with us.
I have a question, Andy. Do you want it for both schools or just Trinity? Why just Trinity?
I had reports on, I hadn't had any people complain about Bell. Of course, I'm not on that side. I live on that side, but the parents from Trinity are calling me. I mean, I was at Harwood's 50th year deal, and I say attacked, I got approached 3 times by 3 parents. And they said, what is going on? You know, my kid comes home and said, there's a fight today. I heard one teacher said they had more fights this year than the last 10. Probably not true. I know somebody said that when I was there and it wasn't true. So I want to know the data of what's happening with kids in discipline. And I know they had a pretty big turnover in assistant principals. Is it consistent? And how many reoffenders? And is the punishment not enough for the crime? Joe and I talked about one incident with drugs, and I disagree, and it's changed now, and I kind of don't understand it, but they changed it. But I think it'd be interesting for y'all to know what the punishments are for all these kids, what they do during the day. I mean, you know for fighting, but you don't know what happens to them. You don't know, you know.
I would back you, but I would want it for both schools, not just one, personally.
All right, Andy, so are you asking just to have the information, or are you wanting a presentation?
I want a presentation. I think you would have questions. I would take it in a Friday update, but that doesn't help y'all any. If we have questions, I may ask a question, and from that, he may ask a question. And you may have a question. I mean, you just brought something up that, if I hadn't brought this up and just asked him to send it to me on Friday update, you wouldn't ask for bail information.
Right.
So I think it should be out in front, and let's see what's going on in discipline, especially after Uvalde. An incident, I'll tell you, assistant principal had a kid in her office at Trinity, and the kid was so upset, couldn't talk, was going crazy, walked across the hall to a community and school counselor and said, can you see this kid right away? And she said, no, my caseload is full. Really? Really? I mean, you have a kid really upset that needs help, and you say, no, my caseload's full? No, I disagree. You know, when things come along like that and kids need help, you got to get them help. Uvalde, I'm telling you guys, you know, there's a lot of kids in our school that needs mental health and help from counselors, and you can't wait 2 days. It's got immediate. And that's one of the things wrong at Trinity. I know the counselors are a mile away, and we had Peggy next door, so Peggy always took those. And so we were very lucky to have her across the hall. It's not that way. Maybe in the new construction, we can solve that problem, put counselors and principals together. You know, all right, walk down this long hall, then go outside and walk about 200 yards, you'll get to a counselor. Well, they may never get there. So there's some things I want to know what's going on, and I think it would be enlightening to y'all on how things are done in the high schools according to discipline and the result and how it's done. That's all. And if y'all don't want to second it, I can just be what's going on.
Already did, so.
Okay.
Well, I would second it too. I have a couple of questions. Is this data that we're able to readily pull? And the reason I ask is I anticipate that once we hear it from Bell and Trinity, we're also going to want to hear it on our junior high levels and see if there's correlations or some continuity. And so my question would be, does it make sense to do the 2 high schools at once, see how that presentation goes, and then ask for the junior high? Or as you're pulling this data, does it make sense for you to pull it for all secondary schools?
I'm pausing for a moment to think about my response. So certainly any discipline data that's entered into PEIMS, as Andy knows, that's a fairly straightforward report. And then we can correlate that to, has a student gone to ISS or Crossroads or DAP 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. That's fairly straightforward. What will be a little bit more complicated is to see what systems are in place in terms of detentions. And when I meet with Andy, I'll make sure I understand exactly all the ones he pulled. But, you know, D-Hall, lunch detention, things of those nature, that's going to be a little bit different based on how processes, and some of that will be in a system somewhere, but it depends, was it teacher-driven or was it a campus-driven decision? But I will dig in and find that, but most of what Andy's asking for, I think we can dig in and find that. And certainly my recommendation would be if we do 1 high school, let's do both and look at it. Let's see how that data looks, and then we can take a peek at the junior high. But we can put together a nice report that shares that data and information, you know, all the way up through the end of the school year. And we can take it, we'll start with last year and, you know, the most relevant school year, if that's okay, and do that and get you some numbers. But it will take a little bit of time to dig around and get all of those numbers, because there's a lot of people not on campus right now, but I can start working with John Hollis to pull some of those reports pretty quickly. Some of the more campus-driven ones, those will be the ones that'll be a little bit harder, but we can always do a follow-up if we want to get this out quickly.
But I know that tardies, ours were 3 tardies, you get a Saturday D-haul. So, I mean, that's one phone call. Then if, you know, you get another Saturday if you miss, and then if you miss that one, you go to AEP for 5 days. So that's pretty standard. But it may be 4 tardies at Bell. It may be 5 tardies at Bell, you get a
Right,
D-haul.
yeah,
So
and
that's-
I don't have I don't know off the top of my head, their D-haul policy or tardy
That'd
policy.
be easy
sure.
to just ask a question. It's not
Sure, but if you
complicated.
want numbers, that just takes a little bit of
Yes.
time to get the numbers, and asking the question's easy, so.
So these are kind of 2 parts. One is the part about how many kids are being disciplined for certain things, and the other part is what does it take to be disciplined for certain things.
Yes.
Yeah, so,
What do you get for fighting, and how many kids fought?
yeah, I'll work on that, Andy. Give me a little bit of time, and I'll get a nice side-by-side report, and we'll just do it if it's okay with everyone here.
We don't
Both-
meet for 3 weeks, though, don't we?
Both campuses.
Month, yeah.
I didn't hear, I'm sorry.
You have a month.
Well,
No, I
but,
just said, I mean,
but
give
in
me-
fairness, there's a shutdown during that time, so.
Yeah, that's the only thing. A lot of my APs and people who will help with some of that report are not here, so
Yeah.
it might be the second meeting in July when I get everybody back. That's all I'm saying, because some of that information will be how the APs, because they're going to be the ones that handle some of the smaller offenses and the frequency and the number. The big stuff, that's easy. We can get that in one report. And then Andy, I just want to, well, I'll clarify with you afterwards about the update on the freshman athletics.
Well, let me add one thing too, is because, you know, Andy said there's been more fights at Trinity than ever before. If we get the number of fights, just that number without some comparison doesn't do anything. So if we're able to pull these numbers, can we get some trends on going back a couple of years?
Yeah, I can. Some of that the bigger stuff, we'll do a trend. We'll look at the last, probably need to go back at least to 2018, 2019, because obviously we only had about 50% of our high school kids, you know, the year before. But we'll get a couple of years so that you can see a trend and see what that looks like. And then we're also able to run a report very easily about how many times the police were involved. Now, involvement doesn't mean that the SRO went over and talked to a kid. That may or may not be reported, but if they were arrested or taken, we will be able to give that report very easily for you, and we can go back a couple of years easy.
Great.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, Board. Item 14.02, opportunity for board members to discuss the HEB ISD 2022-2023 budget. I want to start by kind of apologizing that I didn't give you guys more of a heads up on this, that I was going to add this to the agenda, but we had a previous discussion that we would try to find a time that we could discuss the budget as a board, so I wanted to wait until we had each had our individual meetings with administration. And of course, this evening we dealt with the largest part of our board, which was the salary schedules. But I wanted to have something on the agenda to where we could discuss if anyone had any questions about the remainder of the budget, that we could kind of have an open dialogue. And I'm going to ask the administration that if the board has any questions at this time, if you have answers, that's helpful. But if you need time, we'll be happy to have you take our questions and then respond back to us later or in a Friday update. So does anybody have anything for the 2022-2023 budget they'd like to discuss?
So I would just like to give some kudos to Dobie and to Dr. Harrington. You know, one of the issues I had last year was we had a budget, we had non-payroll budgets that were not line itemed, and I didn't know how we got to our numbers. You know, we had the superintendent with a budget of 600 and some odd thousand with no idea of how we got to those numbers. We had $187,000 for the board, no justification for those numbers. And I always said, and I wanted for the people who were here last year in those positions, it was never a question on integrity of the numbers. It was just a question on how we arrived at it. We have that this year, and I really appreciate it. We've got each one of our non-payroll budgets broken down, line items, to show how we got to our numbers. And I really appreciate that. And I also really appreciate that, you know, Dr. Harrington, you took your budget and you took it down by $130,000. the board took our budget down $50,000. And I think part of the reason that was the case is there was some padding in the budget just as things were rolled over, not in any nefarious way, but you know, we budgeted this much last year, we're going to go ahead and budget this much next year, you know, not taking into account what was actually expended. And you know, some of these decreases have been, you know, offset in other places, but I just wanted to let you know I recognize the work that went into this. Adobe, thank you for gathering this information. You know, getting it in June is such an improvement than you know, me asking for it last year and then getting it sometime, you know, after Christmas. I really appreciate you, so thank you. Joe, thank you. This makes me so much more comfortable with where we are this year compared to last year, and I really appreciate it. I don't know that tonight's budget discussion is very conducive to an actual discussion, and that it may not bring on anything. I've been working with Joe on maybe some different timelines going forward on, you know, y'all did a budget session in January of last year before I was on the board. That timeline may make sense going forward just because we want to get the raises out a little bit earlier. We want to be able to post jobs and hire a little bit earlier, and so having a larger budget discussion in January, like a pre-budget discussion, may make more sense. And so, Matt, thank you for putting this on the agenda tonight. I don't know that anything is going to come of it just because of timing, and you know, we had our individual budget meetings rather than as a full board, and that's fine. But I just want to let you know, Joe, that I really appreciate where we are this year as compared to last year. Some work went into it, and I appreciate it.
Chris, I want to add to that. You and I actually did our budget meeting together because of your timing, but I enjoyed having someone else in there to bounce conversations off with. So I think it would, in my opinion, it would be great to have it as teams instead of individual going forward.
Well, Don took my comment as well. It just happened this year that I think in the past we've done individuals so that we could have the opportunity to ask as many questions for the individual person. But we kind of teamed up, several of us this time around, and I echo what Don says to your point, Andy, on your previous motion. We tend to come up with other questions that we wouldn't have thought of without a team member. And just piggybacking on that, Dobie, I think that makes it easier, you and Joe and your staff, not to have 7 individual meetings, but maybe we have some method of maybe combining some of those, maybe bring them down to 3 or.
Let the president have their own separate meeting, but then the rest of us can team up as twos, which makes sense.
Yeah, and we can discuss how to do that. And yeah, I've been talking with Dr. Harrington also about ways to speed up the process, because we know that we'd love to be able to get all of our raises and everything. Even though we were ahead of where we normally are, we were still a little bit behind where a lot of other districts were. So we'd like to be able to speed that up. That meeting that Chris referred to, that was kind of from what I remember, was kind of an emergency, our hair might be on fire kind of meeting, because so much had changed in HB3 and trying to figure out everything that was going to happen, you know, with ESSER and changes to HB3 and funding, and are we going to be okay? It was that kind of meeting to let the board have that kind of discussion, but that could also be a good timing if we do want to have a group meeting, because that would be a January meeting that would lead into maybe early February individual meetings, and then we could have these votes that we had this evening a lot sooner. So I know that's something that Dr. Harrington's very interested in, and it's definitely something that we're looking at.
Okay, Matt, since that's $150,000, couldn't we use that for Darla's dibs?
I think it's already been spent elsewhere.
I mean, we just saved it just now, though. I got you $150,000.
Cut out of his budget.
We can
we'll
find
cut
it,
out of our
Andy.
budget. All right. Any other discussion? Any other budget discussions? All right, thank you, board, and we'll try to move this up and make this a more useful conversation in the future. Let's see, 1403, consider approval of nomination for TASB Board Position 11A. Currently, this is the position that was held by Becky St. John from Grapevine Colleyville. She has not been renominated, so it is an open position. Is there any board member who is interested in running for this position at this time?
Yes, I am.
All right. So Julie Cole is interested in running. That would require a nomination from the board. So if anybody would like to make a motion for a nomination,
I move that the board approve the nomination of Julie Cole for the TASB board position, Region 11D, as in David.
A as in
11A.
apple.
A is an
Apple, I'm sorry.
Second.
I screened on the wrong one.
I have a motion, a second, for the board to approve the nomination of Julie Cole for the TASB board position, Region 11A. Please vote. And that motion passes. So good luck to Ms. Cole, and let us know
Thank
how
you.
we can support your
I'm gonna need you all to
candidacy.
call all of your friends at the other districts.
Got it.
All right, so the 14.04 is for 11D, but since we're only allowed to nominate one board member, we will not be able to consider 1404. We do not need a second closed session, is that correct? Then I will accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Any second?
Second.
We are adjourned.
You know what? We got through a lot in a fairly short amount of time.
Holly, Dr. Norgard,
You got your pen?
just as a person